Hey everybody, how's it going? This is our 2020, our second jazz talk of 2020. Um, and we're so thrilled to be featuring tonight Mr. Alain Sullivan. Um, Alain is a great friend of mine and a wonderful friend of the jazz art form. He is a 21-year-old saxophonist, woodwind instrumentalist, composer, and arranger from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and he is finishing up his last semester at the University of Michigan with a dual degree in jazz studies and, get this, biomolecular chemistry. There, Alain performed with the University of Michigan Jazz Ensemble throughout the country. Alain has studied with Andrew Bishop, Ellen Rowe, Robert Hurst, Benny Green, Dennis Wilson, and many others who have had a profound influence on his music and career. Alain is a 2018 Young Arts Honorable Mention winner in jazz, and he placed third in the 2020 North American Saxophone Alliance Collegiate Jazz Competition. He is well versed in many jazz styles, and he is also well versed in R&B, funk, and pop. Alain has performed in a variety of settings across the country and internationally, performing with artists such as Regina Carter, Charles McPherson, Aaron Deal, Scotty Barnhart, Dick Oates, as well as the Ann Arbor-based funk group Sabbatical Bob. Alain plans to attend medical school in the future, and I'm so excited to have him with us for tonight's jazz talk. Um, Please put your virtual hands together for my good friend, Mr. Alain Sullivan. Alain, are you there? Hey, Alain, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing, Jordan?
Oh, doing so well. How about yourself?
Good, good. Thank you for having me. This is
Oh,
awesome.
it's such a pleasure to be talking to you. Um, honestly, when I got the opportunity to, choose an interviewee for this week,
Mhm.
my first thought was, cool, I get to catch up with Alon. 'Cause
Yeah, yeah.
it's been a while since,
It has.
since we had have talked kind of face to face here, and I know that it's over Zoom, but it's really cool to be talking to you. So first of all, welcome. And
Thank you.
I already gave the Cliff Notes version of your bio.
Mhm.
Um, but if you could tell me, what was your musical background?
Yeah, yeah.
Like
Uh-huh.
why saxophone? How did you
Mhm.
get into playing the saxophone? Like, tell me
Mhm.
about that.
So my brother in band, he played saxophone. So I saxophone had always been something that I'd been around and I knew of. Um, I remember fourth grade, we did the instrument tryouts, and he had me try the instruments. He first had me try trombone, and then he put, oh, trombone's your number one, because it was the first one I tried, and he knew that most kids wouldn't want to play trombone. And me, I was already set on playing saxophone going in. So I pretty much begged him to let me try clarinet. He kept putting me on flute. Here, we'll try flute. Here, we'll try trumpet. I'm like, can I try clarinet? And I was getting the sound out. I sounded better on clarinet than I did on the other instruments. And he's like, "We're gonna put clarinet as your number two." And I'm like, "Thank you, but I'm playing clarinet. Uh, thanks for that." So I started on clarinet. I took lessons with Michael Bennett at Meyer Music. I started when I was 10, and pretty much right away, right after that, I got a saxophone and just started practicing. Because at my school, you had to play clarinet before you could play saxophone. So I worked as hard as I could on clarinet and as well as on sax before my teacher, Ann Reinhardt, who is the best, pretty much. She's awesome.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She is amazing. She said, "You're good. Let's move you on to saxophone." So from there, I started taking lessons with the saxophone teacher who was there. His name was Ryan Sensenbrenner, who was a great first saxophone teacher. He really helped establish the discipline that playing music would take. And he never really sugarcoated that either. I remember one lesson I showed up, I was not prepared, and he explained in no uncertain terms how important it is, you know, to keep your eyes on the ball game and keep your eye on the bullseye, all that. And then I started working with Bradley Saniga as well, who's another great teacher. And then from there, I remember when I first started playing saxophone, my dad told me who Charlie Parker was. And he showed me the live video of Bird and Dizzy playing Hot House after they won those awards, and after the white announcers called them boys. You can visibly see their reaction on that. I didn't get it because I mean I was only 10 and that stuff can fly over your head. I just enjoyed the music, and I was hooked once I heard Hot House. Interestingly, it took me about 8 years before I found, or like six or 8 years before I finally learned that head. But from there I was hooked. My dad got me Dizzy and Bird at Carnegie Hall. Then I got one of those, you know, those Jazz Master albums, which are just like a collection of.
I sure do.
Yeah, I got the Charlie Parker one. And then from there, it just became a mix of just learning new people, got into Cannonball, got into Train, got into Sonny Rollins. But I didn't really start learning how to play jazz and really improvising until I got to Aquinas Jazz Camp going into my freshman year. Which was led by, it's still probably my favorite camp to this day, just because it does everything I think you need to do to start off playing jazz, where it's very accessible, but they give you knowledge that is still applicable just no matter where you are at a level. So I love my time there. Got to make really good connections with all the faculty there. Who I still hear from and play with to this day. Dr. Burr, Dr. Connell, Tom Lockwood, Bob Nixon, all of them are just fantastic. And from there, I started taking lessons with local musician Ed Clifford, who is amazing.
Yeah.
He pretty much taught me all the theory and the wherewithal to play jazz. And he was also a great multi-instrumentalist. So once I started playing clarinet and flute again, he was right there to help me bridge that gap. Because there is definitely a learning curve with your doubles, but he made that really smooth. And then starting my sophomore year, once I had started getting a little more solid on the horn, I started taking lessons with John Nickel. We would drive down to Mount Pleasant at Central.
Yeah.
And that was your undergrad. So yeah, I know you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know you know John, Professor Nickel well. And he was invaluable just in my development as a saxophonist. We focused mostly on classical, but just in general, keeping up with the discipline, he reinforced that. Getting some good literature and repertoire down on the saxophone, absolutely invaluable. I wouldn't be where I was without him. And I also studied with Bill Sears for my last 2 years in high school, and he taught me just pretty much everything Professor Nickel taught me, but on the jazz side of things. So really got me into transcribing, playing language. And from there, I just played as much as I could, listened to as much as I could. Got a lot of good mentorship from people like Caleb Elzinga. He was always generous to let me play on the gigs with them.
Yeah, Caleb's
just to get that playing experience. Randy Marsh, of course, Dr. Burr, Dr. Connell took me under their wing for several gigs in high school. That gave me the experience that I needed going into college. And yeah, so high school is, of course, a really important time, developing some of that stuff. And then, of course, by the time you get to college and you start working with Andrew Bishops and Benny Green, who just have a wealth of
Hmm.
knowledge, just completely overhauled, no pun intended, my approach to playing the horn. Just completely expanded everything that I was going for in terms of how to approach soloing language, learning tunes, um, and yeah, just from there, I just kept playing, kept trying to find my own voice. Still study the masters, of course, because that's your bread and butter. And yeah, that's been my general journey musically.
Right on, right on. Well, we'll kind of dive into a couple of those
Yeah.
different areas in depth. But I just want to point out that we have some fun comments here. Brendan Davis is here, and Brendan says, "King of smooth jazz," with like 3 or 4 exclamation points. And he says, "What do you think about when you're improvising?"
Hi, Brendan. How you doing? He's one. This is one of my good friends from school. I played many gigs with him. He's an incredible piano player. One of the
Yeah, man.
best I've played with. And what do I think about when improvising? I don't want to be as cliche and say like I think about the story or something, you know. Um, but that's kind of the vibe I'm going for. I like to explore. One of the things that Ed Clifford told me about Train is that when he was soloing, he was always searching, and you can really hear that. Like not everything is so rehearsed all the time. You know, he'll try something and it may not come out the way he wanted it, and he'll just keep going. And it so that's always been sort of my basic approach is to try and find something interesting on the spot. Um, and I've especially when I got into college, starting to find new ways of playing out. Um, just experimenting, I think, is the coolest part about improvising. And while keeping it in the context of the tradition and the language that came before, you know. I think the best and worst advice that people get is there's no wrong note in jazz because because theoretically there is no wrong note, but it's about the choices you make with those notes, and sometimes uh, I think that's where a lot of the experimenting and the practicing comes in, being able to make the choices and understand why you made them, and find a way to resolve it, um, but
Yeah,
also be true to yourself, um, not just trying to copycat everyone, you know.
yeah,
So
man.
that's been my approach. I've never really had to put into words until now. It's been tough to. It's
And we
always tough to put words in that, you
and
know.
we often don't, but it's
Hmm.
important, I think, to be able to do, and I think you did so beautifully.
Thank you.
Um, yeah. So let's talk early. Oh, such an eloquent answer, says Brandon. Yeah,
Thank
Brandon,
you,
I agree. Right
Brendan.
on, man. Yeah. So let's talk about some early kind of things in
Hmm.
your lineage as an improviser. So,
Yeah.
what was your first transcription? What was that first solo that you
Uh-huh.
said, I gotta play that?
First solo, let me think. The one that I remember the most was the first one. I actually got assigned it by Bill Sears. It was the Cannonball Au Pravave, and that was an important solo for me because Cannonball's articulation is just ridiculous. I still can't match it. I don't think I ever will be able to. He's just so precise and brilliant with his articulation and language. Um, but the first solo that I remember feeling really driven to work on was Kenny Garrett's "I'll Remember April," the live one that he did with
That's
Woody
a
Shaw.
great one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Freddie Hubbard and Dizzy. Uh, because I remember how accessible it was in terms of saying, "Oh, you can tell he's studied his language," but he has such a unique approach of figuring how to go in and out, especially by the second chorus of that solo. And So the Kenny Garrett I'll Remember
Yeah.
April was a really great solo for me.
I
That's the one that I remember the most, and because some solos, you know, you learn them and you'll forget bits of them, but that's the one that always I can just pick up and usually play right off
I
the bat.
I love that one, man. I love that
Mhm.
one. And I love Kenny Garrett. You know how I
Yeah,
feel about Kenny Garrett.
yeah,
Yeah, I am an aficionado of Kenny
Mhm.
Garrett. Hey, by the way, I wanted to mention
Yes.
something. So I'm kind of watching the stream here and watching things. Um, your high school band teacher is watching. So I don't know
Oh,
if
is
you
Mrs.
wanted to.
Reinhardt in here?
Yeah, she is. She's up in here, and I don't know if you wanted to give her that shout out, that beautiful shout out
Yes.
that you said
Hi,
earlier.
Mrs. Reinhardt. I was talking earlier about how amazing you've been throughout my career, and from when I started in fifth grade, and you're the best. Thank you for checking this out, and thank you for coming to my recital back in February. That was awesome, and hope you're safe and well. I've seen the marching band, and looks like things are going pretty well despite everything.
Yeah, man. High school teachers are
You're
so,
just the
so,
best.
so important. They're so
So
important
important.
to us. You know, when I was getting started, I had a teacher who didn't really emphasize in middle school like a ton of like
Mhm.
music reading,
Mhm.
which was to my detriment like later on. But he did emphasize playing by ear.
Mhm.
And so
That.
I did that a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And so like, I mean, I think so many of these incredible educators right now,
Yeah.
they are responsible for really getting us started and getting
Exactly.
musicians like yourself started.
Yeah.
Um, and you know what? I just think that there are like I know a lot of them that are the most humble people like in the world,
They are.
and they're like, well, I didn't really do anything. Well, actually, you did. So,
You
you
did.
know, taking a chance and believing in
Yeah.
you know great young musicians, I think it goes so far. And
Mhm.
frankly, um, you know, it's such an important part of the fabric of music right now,
It
like
is.
that beginning stages, those beginning
Yeah.
stages. So yeah, I
Yeah.
wanted to mention her presence because
Yeah.
I know that you had said earlier like what an
Yeah.
important influence she was on you. So um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And I was fortunate to have her not just in high school, but from the beginning.
oh, that's
She taught
awesome.
she taught my partner school, St. Stephen.
See, that's always
So
good.
from fifth grade up all the way through graduation.
That's a if you can get the right teacher in there, that's a great model. Um,
Absolutely.
right on. So let's talk about your kind of your collegiate career
Hmm.
now. So we have this situation and I say we because I'm a Michigan grad. For those of you who don't know, I did my master's there. Um, so when you said Andrew Bishop, like completely like revolutionized how you're approaching the instrument, what do you mean by that? Like what? Be more specific. Let's really
Yeah,
dive into that concept.
sure. So coming in, I had some language under my belt. I had the sound I think I was going for, but it wasn't quite there yet. And first off the bat, Professor Bishop just had me working on long tones, a new approach to playing long tones than I had been before, which really mellowed out the sound I was going for and sort of taught me a bit more throat control, especially when playing tenor.
He certainly
Uh,
has that
it
effect,
can
doesn't
be,
he?
yeah, it can be finicky. Just you need the right amount of air. But then he started having me learn different sounds when it comes to soloing. Not just I'd come in with a bit of diminished language and that kind of stuff, but whether it was working on augmented scales, but and especially superimposing changes. We worked with train changes for quite a bit. I did a transcription of about half of Train's satellite solo. I still have unfinished business with that thing. I do need to finish it. It's been about 4 years, but
I don't
oh, I
even
can't
know.
hear. There we go.
My bad, my bad. I don't even know. I feel like there's nobody that, I mean, are you ever really done with a train solo? Like, are you ever really like,
No,
have you ever arrived?
absolutely not.
No, I
Not,
mean, short of being
yeah.
transplanted in Train's body, in the mid,
You're never done. Even
like,
he wasn't
do
done,
you ever really like arrive there? I don't think so.
Yeah, he was transcendent. He was transcendent to the nth degree. It was just trying to navigate how he can be so fluid on changes like that, but so
Yeah,
melodic. It absolutely brilliant.
yeah, yeah.
So
So anyway,
train changes was definitely a part of that. But I started to figure out my own way of playing out, and he was important in cultivating that. I think that's the best part about Professor Bishop is he always wants to cultivate the style and sound that you want. Every saxophone in the studio plays completely differently from each other, um, and that's definitely in no part to his willingness to cultivate, the individuality in the playing. I think that's a general vibe at the school,
I do
but
too.
definitely with Bishop more than any, because he understands that not everything that works for him will work for me. Like we've tried some sounds, like we just worked because I just learned a George Russell tune, Aesthetic. We tried some sounds with his Lydian, with the Lydian approach, and some of it worked for me, some of it didn't, and he still goes on it. It's totally cool. Not everything has to work for you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, the saxophone is such a blank slate.
Yeah,
Like
it
it's
is.
such a blank canvas. Like, I mean, when you have people like, I mean, yourself and Peter Formanek and C
Mm-hmm.
Tabs all learning from one another. I think that like
Mm-hmm.
the studio is, and when I was there, I had this guy
Mm-hmm.
Eric Schweitzer,
Mm-hmm.
another great saxophonist Dave Sayers, Eddie Goodman actually
Mm-hmm.
also, and we were all learning from each other like just as
Yeah,
much as we were learning from Bishop, and
exactly.
I think that there's a lot to be said for that, and the kind of environment that he cultivates
Yeah,
really lends itself well to that. That's
it
beautiful, man.
does.
Um,
Absolutely. And yeah, I should mention that my fellow students have absolutely um, had a profound impact, just because everyone plays differently. Tabs got to work with Dominic Bieringa,
yeah,
completely different
Dominic.
approach, but still incredible. Kassam Belgrave, who's probably one of my favorite
Yes,
saxophonists ever.
yes,
Um,
yes.
just how absolutely effortless he navigates the horn. It just every practice he'd be like, yo, learn this lick and check out this pattern, and it just and everyone's like that at the school. But just those are the names that first popped into mind.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. So let's talk about your music. So I'm sure you do like a fair bit of writing. Um,
Yeah,
so describe for me maybe your compositional process.
yeah. So I have a lot of written stuff on the cutting board on the table. I only have one fully complete composition called Untitled Number Seven. I don't. First thing, I don't like titling my things because I can't think of any good titles. They always come out kind of corny and weird, so I've just untitled them until
Mine
I.
do too, and then I stopped caring about that.
Yeah, I cannot title worth my life. Um, but my compositional approach uh, comes from improvisational melody first. So I almost always write the chords to my tunes first, because it'd be something I like to have something that I'd be able to solo over, um, and then usually a melody will pop up, and I'll record it into my phone with the voice memo app that every phone has, and from there I'll sit down at the piano and try just different melodic lines based on that, based on the line that just popped in my head. Usually it's when I'm, walking to class or on the bus or something will just come. Uh, it I sort of got that from listening to interviews by Michael Jackson. He talked about how uh, he would hear just a little bit in his head, and he, at the time it was the 80s, he'd record into a tape recorder, and then from there he'd expound
Yes.
upon it. And I found that approach really interesting, and it's worked out probably the best for me. And I worked with Andy Milne last semester, and I had a tough time pushing compositions forward. And he taught me that sometimes you just gotta, you know, take the gloves off and just go in and work the composition a little bit. And yeah, that's been most of my approach. I like a good melody, and I like progressions and interesting solo forms. Has kind of been at the
Yeah.
top of my mind.
Yeah, man. This is all great. I think, you know, what you said about, you know, just getting in there and getting your hands dirty with a composition, I think that's very analogous to a fun thing about dissertations and theses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that quote is the best dissertation is a completed dissertation.
Yeah, exactly.
The best tune is a completed tune.
Yeah, and
So
sometimes it's hard to know. I like how will you ever be satisfied? You know, I hear that from writers a lot, that maybe their endings don't feel they want the way they want, so they just keep tweaking it and tweaking it. And usually the first thing they came up with was the best and fantastic. So yeah, it can be a lot about putting that into perspective and just realizing that, you know, sometimes it'll never be, you know, 100%. It's like in stats, you can never be 100% sure, have 100% confidence on something, but 99.7 is really close.
yeah. Well, I know a lot of people who can have 100% confidence in something, but that doesn't mean it's correct.
Yeah,
You know
exactly.
what
Yep,
I'm saying?
absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted you know, to kind of ask about, well, we're talking about, you know, your penchant for melody, right?
Hmm.
Uh, so I feel like almost, you know, what do you see in the music that's around you? Do you feel like
Hmm.
with your penchant for melody that you're like, you know, just kind of another face in the crowd, or do you feel like you're running, you know, in a different,
Hmm.
or not necessarily contrary, but just maybe a different
Hmm.
stream to like your either your contemporaries or either the
Yeah,
that you hear around you?
I
What?
feel like I definitely feel like it's a mix of that. A lot of my influence comes from what I listen to. I listen to surprisingly a ton of R&B. Uh,
Is that
I have
surprising?
my Not really. I mean, that's what I grew up with a lot.
Like, is it surprising that you love, you know, great melodies, and then also
Yeah,
you want R&B is one of your main influences? Like,
yeah,
frankly, I think the melodies in, you know, in R&B and like
yeah.
being able to like, really hit a vibe with something that
Hmm.
you can solo over, like,
Yeah,
I think that's
that's exactly it. You
excellent,
know, that's
you know?
exactly it. And I guess I always thought of that, but it didn't really hit me until I started talking with Patrick Bartley, who is absolutely huge on melody. He I've talked to him extensively about just how important melody is. And he runs this group called the J Music Ensemble, which is a jazz group that arranges Japanese and video game music, and tries to meld jazz with Japanese music. So I've been digging a lot of Japanese J-pop and Japanese R&B music, and it really hit me when I started humming these melodies to songs in a language I didn't know, you know. But the melody is so powerful that boom, I know that song. I can just hum the melody, and I can feel the emotion and without knowing what the lyrics say. And I don't really translate foreign language lyrics ever anymore, just because of how powerful that melody is. And so that had a profound influence in general. And just art, yeah, like you said, R&B. Um, it's so focused on groove. It's focused on the
Absolutely.
melody. It's focused on harmony, just absolutely ridiculous harmony and unique
Absolutely.
ways of approach, and
But organic, but like really
organic,
like
exactly.
like when you
Yeah.
hear it, you're like, oh, that's exactly where that was
Hmm.
supposed to be.
And
That's
that's because,
wow.
it comes from jazz, and jazz comes from blues in New Orleans, and that
Mhm.
comes from the
Yes.
slaves. So it was always rooted in emotion and melody and the struggle, Um,
Yeah,
so I'm
absolutely.
very fortunate to just appreciate and love the music.
Yeah. Well, and I think, everybody needs to get a little bit more R&B in their lives.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
a proponent of like,
Yes,
hey, get hip, like everybody get
exactly.
some of that in your life. And I,
Yeah.
when I assign transcriptions to my students, and when I
Hmm.
assign just different tasks, I guess, to them,
Yeah.
um, and nothing against the people that I'm about to like mention, but
Yeah, no, no.
they'll say something like, "Oh, I brought in a Michael Brecker solo," or "I brought
Hmm.
in this sick like insert name of like post
Hmm.
70s, post 80s player," and
Yeah.
I'll say, "Cool, right on, sounds great.
Yeah.
Why don't you play some 1960s Sonny Rollins for me next time?"
Hmm.
Or
Yeah.
like, "Why don't you hit up this 1942 Bird solo?"
Yeah.
Or, and to me, I'm always like, the music is so much about
Hmm.
ancestry, and you touched
Yes.
on this earlier, and I
Hmm.
want to I want to dive deeper on that
Yeah.
comment. So
Absolutely.
you said, so the number one thing that I hear students come to me like
Hmm.
fresh out of high school, and they say, um, I really want to have my own voice. Like I want to do my
Yeah.
own thing. I don't, if I transcribe all these cannonball solos,
Hmm.
like what is my own original voice going to disappear?
Yeah.
Am I just going to be a cannonball clone?
Hmm.
And was there ever a time in your like musical upbringing that you thought like that, or that no judgment here? I just like I think that
Yeah.
I feel like it's a phase that like a lot of young
Yeah.
players.
I I was a little more fortunate in that by the time I had started transcribing, I had already had a lot of diversified listening under my belt. Like my first solo was Cannonball, and then I did what did I do next? I did a Kenny Garrett and then a Coltrane.
Right.
Um, but I definitely know that feeling of not necessarily sounding like a clone, but not being satisfied just in general with what you sound like. Um, like there's always that period where you feel like you're just playing the same stuff over and over and over again. And it's kind of the one of those things that just comes and goes. I've began to notice, and so I think listening to just as much different stuff as you can is probably the best remedy for that sort of issue. And I wouldn't even call it an issue. I mean, if you play a lot like Cannibal, that's fantastic because he's absolutely incredible. But I think it's just having a diverse palette, um, having your paint board have a bunch of different colors that you can pull from.
Without a doubt,
Yeah,
absolutely. So let's talk about canon,
yeah,
um, and let's talk about kind of this whole vibe. So, um, Cannonball Adderley.
mhm.
Now he really got into this soul jazz thing.
Yeah,
Obviously
absolutely.
he's coming out of hard bop, which hard
Yep.
bop and soul. I mean, they're basically like brethren art
Yeah.
forms, right? But he's
Hmm.
he's got this soul jazz thing going on.
Yeah.
Um, and so talk about that for a little bit. Like talk about
Hmm.
Cannon's like I just think Cannon is so fascinating because he can
Yeah.
play all of the bop that Bird does,
Yeah. Hmm.
but he's got such a different bent to the kind of the ethos
Yeah.
of playing.
I think a lot of that because both come from the blues and the emotion of the blues. That's always the first thing that comes to mind when I hear his playing, whether it's his bop stuff or his funk soul. Um, and I think he was the first cat really to really bridge that gap. Um, I think a lot of people nowadays can get caught up, because we have smooth jazz now, but is it real jazz? And I think if Cannonball were alive today, I think he would have dabbled in some smooth jazz, because there's some really good stuff to get out of that. There's a lot of good groove and approaches to playing that's unlike anything else. And I think Cannonball understood that because you can tell in his playing that he wants to be as diverse as possible. None of his solos sound exactly the same. There's only one instance that I can think of, and it's on Cannonball Takes Charge, where he plays the same solo break on I Remember You and I Told Every Little Star.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I always thought that was funny. Because
It's still hip though.
it's still hip. It's an amazing line. But I think just him wanting to be a diverse and varied musician, I think is a lot that we can take from. And it's good. It's great stuff either way, whether he's playing bop or whether he's playing Mercy, Mercy, Mercy with an old electric keyboard, Joe Zawinul on the keys.
Yeah. Okay, now I have to ask you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jazz and biomolecular chemistry.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So I career-wise, I was pretty much set on pre-med. Pretty much ever since I was young. I don't think that's ever changed. I couldn't really see myself doing anything else because I like science. Medicine seemed just so interesting. But then music just sort of came out of left field. I didn't realize how much I'd enjoy playing music until I did. So I remember by high school, I was kind of having a bit of a conundrum because I did want to at least study music to a high level while I could, while at the same time still doing the pre-med route. So I remember I only applied to schools where I had the option of doing both. I only applied to 3 schools: Michigan, Michigan State, and Indiana, because they both had really high level jazz and music programs, but also really high level science and academics. So Michigan in particular was good because they have or not even good, amazing, obviously, because that's where I ended up going. Because they have a dedicated dual degree program, and it's really simple to apply for that. And one thing that I don't know if it was just coincidence or if I'm pretty sure they do some planning in it, where almost all of my classes there weren't any conflicts there. Most music classes and jazz classes were Tuesday, Thursday. Most science classes are Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Wow, that's pretty much unheard of.
It worked out pretty perfectly. I only had maybe 1 or 2 conflicts in 4.5 years. And I actually have 1 conflict now, but because it's online, it's a lot easier to manage that. But I think it's important to pursue what you want to pursue. If you want to pursue more than one thing, there are options out there. And for the most part, programs will be supportive. Professor Bishop has been my biggest supporter. Do what you want.
Yeah, without a doubt. So we are in the middle of a global pandemic.
Yes.
So as
Yes,
somebody who is
yeah.
entering the field of medicine,
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that.
I think first and foremost, it's difficult to see how politicized something like this is. I don't find it particularly surprising, given how the administration currently feels about science. Cutting the pandemic response in 2018, refusal to acknowledge climate change, stuff like that. I'm not really surprised, but I am exceedingly disappointed in how it's been handled despite all that. Especially with the news coming out that there could potentially be no COVID negotiations until after the election. Fortunately, it's only in a few weeks, but even so, it's very worrying. And my dad, who's also a physician, he is exceedingly concerned about the situation we're in. I'm glad to those, and it's fortunately quite a lot, probably the majority of people who are being responsible and trying to fight this virus, wearing their masks, socially distancing. But I'm not gonna lie and say it's completely settled, because it can be unsettling to read some of the stuff out there about what's going on, that people can't just take a little bit of selflessness and do good for your fellow man.
Yeah.
All we can do is, right now, we're just waiting on this vaccine.
Yeah.
But it's also been interesting to see the ways in which we communicate, how they shift, and it a lot of the stuff that we take for granted just feels a lot more precious. You know, playing a gig in person feels precious. For me, my research lab got cut, and I was set to write my thesis, so I needed the summer to conduct the research. So that's been completely shifted, and it just puts everything into perspective. But for me personally, it was also a good time to just relax for once, for several months without any obligation. I know several people have found that peaceful. But yeah, I think it's worrying, but I'm exceedingly grateful and proud of those who have been responsible throughout this.
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
hope that those who are will continue to do so, and those who haven't will listen to the facts and the science. Because science it's very rarely wrong, you know.
We got a question in here from April. April asks, in a time when we are all trying to cope, what are your thoughts about using or listening to jazz music as a way to calm nerves?
Yes, that's my cousin. Hey, April. Hope everyone's well. I think jazz is exceedingly perfect music to calm your nerves. Just because it's such a not even delicate, but sensitive art form, and it's very conscientious, because there's so much you can pour any emotion you want into jazz, and I definitely think it's a great coping mechanism. I think music by Black artists in general is obviously I'm a huge fan, because all I listen to is R&B, and I just think it comes from such a tradition, such a rich tradition, knowing that there's that level of transcendence and support through music like that. And it
Without a
says a lot about where we've been and where we need to go from here.
Absolutely. So how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your music and your musical output?
It's been pretty significant. This was supposed to be a pretty crazy year. I was really excited to partake in. I was set to do my first UMich prod for a musical, and that got canceled, of course. Lost about $2,000. I'm lucky that I have my parents' home to come back to, but I know many musician friends who have been struggling, losing gigs. The biggest blow had to be the South Africa trip that 4 of us from the department were set to be in South Africa for 3 weeks and perform. So that was really the saddest part. Because it's been my dad's dream to get to Africa, of course, uh, visit the land of our ancestors, and
Yeah.
I was really looking forward to being there. But I know I'll get a chance to go there someday.
Yeah, you'll find a way. Music will
Yeah.
find a way. Medicine too. Both of those things, I think, will find a way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are your upcoming projects? Like where, I mean,
Hmm.
by the end of this interview, I feel like the whole world, or at least all three people that are listening right
Hmm.
now or watching right now, will they're big Alain Sullivan fans like I am. I'm a really big Alain Sullivan fan. So where can they
Yeah.
check out your stuff? Like where can
Um,
they check out
yeah.
what projects are you working on right now?
So a lot of it I'm working on at home. I have a few arrangements I'm working on. Right now, most of the stuff that I've been doing is for University of Michigan. So through there, the University of Michigan Jazz Facebook page, they upload a lot of the projects I've been working on. Currently, Michigan is partnered with Detroit, an organization in Detroit, to do a Motown initiative. So I'm working on arranging a few Motown pieces. I, of course, because I'm an
Yes.
exceedingly huge Michael Jackson fan. I have a few Jackson 5 arrangements in mind that I'm
Amazing.
hopefully going to be bringing to the table virtually. I've on my Instagram at LemelKH2, LEMELLEKH2. I upload stuff that I'm working on there. I'm trying to get more active on Instagram. Uh, I'd usually been pretty nervous about posting stuff in the past, so I'm kind of playing catch up there.
Man, you don't have anything to
Yeah.
be nervous about.
No, thank
Um,
you.
now here's
Mhm.
another kind of a thing. Like, man, I don't trust people who don't like the Jackson Five or Michael Jackson. I
Yeah.
just don't.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like people who like really hate dogs.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
like it's cool if you like just tolerate dogs or whatever.
Hmm.
But people who like hate dogs, that's weird.
It's
Like
just,
like
yeah.
I don't trust you. Like
Dogs
there's
are the
something weird
best.
about
Yeah.
um so
Absolutely.
April has another question here and
Yeah.
she says, are there plans for you to have your own catalog perhaps on YouTube or
Yes,
something?
I do upload on YouTube every once in a while. A lot of the performances that I've done, I've tried to get up on there. Just, yeah, to, like you said, catalog and just have a timeline of sort of my progress and just some of the stuff I've done. So I will continue to do YouTube as much as I can as well, because it's a great place to sort of collect all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, we are in kind of our closing minutes here.
Mhm.
I just realized we haven't had you play.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Let me.
just maybe, can you, bless us with some music here, some of your talent?
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Oh, thanks. I will. Let's. I'll do. Let me turn on original sound so we don't have the echo. So I'll let's do a ballad. Um, why not?
Love a
I'll
good
do
ballad.
a I'll do a body and soul.
Yeah, man.
Thank
Beautiful,
you.
beautiful work. Yeah,
Thank you.
beautiful. Um, Man, I hear the train in you.
Thank you.
Like I hear Hawk. Um, I hear Prez.
Oh, thank
Beautiful,
you.
beautiful playing.
Thank
It's
you.
so good to hear you play again,
Oh,
man.
thank you.
Um, yeah, and somebody, April says I need to put him on my Amazon playlist. Nice job.
Thanks, April.
I agree. I agree, April. I absolutely agree.
Thank
That's
you.
great.
Thanks, cuz.
Yeah, man. Beautiful playing.
Thank you.
So I'd like to thank everyone so much for tuning in to our West Michigan Jazz Society Jazz Talk. We are talking with so many great musicians. Just to give you a heads up, we have got some wonderful, wonderful musicians coming up, just like Alain was. We'll be doing a music educator panel soon. We'll be talking with a wonderful vocalist named Sharon Cho. We will be talking with some other wonderful musicians. So, Alain, I just want to thank you, man, so much from the bottom of my heart for your time, um, and for your incredibly insightful conversation.
Oh,
It's
thank
it's
you.
been really a pleasure catching up with
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. It feels like it's it's been a long time, but man, thank you again. This was really good. This was really fun.
Right on, man. Yeah. All right. Support this young man. Support Alain
Thank you.
Sullivan and his music, the band Sabbatical Bob, and all of his exploits at the University of Michigan. Thank you so much, Alain, and we'll talk soon.
Absolutely.
All
Thanks
right.
again.
Peace, man. Take care.
See ya.